Hey, welcome back to part 2. Before we get into the scenarios, I would like to talk about control airspace because the first scenario has a airspace conflict. Now, for FAA airspace, this is a summary. Again, this is not going to be detailed because you don't need to know as much for flying drones. Class A, you have to be instrument rated pilot. That's 18,000 feet to flight level 600. Class B, again, you won't be in this airspace, but there may be a small portion if you live near a busy airport like Chicago O'Hare, Miami, that stretches to the surface. But Class B is surface up to 10,000 feet. So most of Class B airspace won't affect a drone, but there is 400 feet to the surface if you live near an airport where you may want to be knowledgeable about Class B airspace. Class C, that area is from the surface to 1,200 feet and then also to 4,000 feet. And it has a 5 and 10 mile nautical ring. I'll go back and show you. This is Class C. So you have 5 miles, 10 miles, 1,200, and then 4,000. Class D, surface to 2,500. So again, most of these Class C and D airspace you won't even come close to flying in, but there is a small portion up to 400 feet that you may touch. So this is an example of Class D. Class E is probably the most complicated. They say Class E is everywhere, but it's above flight level 600, so it's even above A airspace. It also, there's a portion at 14,500. There's a section of Class E, 1,200 feet, 700 feet, and then also the surface. So Class E is a little bit more confusing, but again, the biggest ones you need to be concerned with are B, C, D, and then certain parts of E you may need approval as well. Class G is the easiest, is uncontrolled airspace. So when you're flying your drone, you don't have to worry about getting approval there. This is just a high-level picture of how each looks. Class B is tailored. No Class B airspace looks the same. Miami is completely different from O'Hare, different from Washington Dulles. They all look different, but they can extend to the surface all the way up to 10,000 feet. Class C, example here, D, and then E has a few different variations, but you have it 14,000 here, 1,200 here, 700 at this point, and Class G is the easiest, it's non-controlled. Now, in addition to FAA controlled airspace and uncontrolled, there's also special use airspace. These are areas that are restricted or prohibited, and for the most part, they're either government related or they could be based on military activity. But either way, even commercial aircraft are not supposed to fly when these areas are active. Now, prohibited areas are always active. Those are areas like P-56 in Washington, D.C. But for these other ones, like restricted, warning, military operation, alert areas, and national security areas, those areas you need to go in and check the details and see when they're active, what kind of activities are going on, what altitudes, and if you're able to fly. For the most part, I would say stay away from them, especially with drone flying because you're the lowest priority. But if you absolutely have to fly in that area, there's a website where you can check and just make sure that you're legal to fly there. So now that I've covered that, let's get back to those scenarios and find out what happened with my friend with the ice cream truck.
Go.
Like now?
Yeah, like now.
Oh, well, I think... All right, for scenario one, Taste of Chicago, the first regulation is flying over people. He mentioned there's 150,000 people or more at this festival. So if I were to go out and take drone photography shots, I would definitely be flying over people that weren't part of my mission. The next thing is safety, pre-planning. If you remember, he was rushing me. I didn't have time to go out and do surveillance on the area, to look at the terrain, any obstacles. I didn't check the weather, and I didn't do any pre-planning in advance on before you fly to check the airspace, which is the next item. So part of the area where the Taste of Chicago is located is downtown Chicago. Again, there's plenty of people walking around, and it's in controlled airspace. So what I want to do next is I want to show you a website. This is Sky Vector, and the area that we would have to fly for Taste of Chicago is right downtown. As you can see, this blue solid line is Chicago O'Hare Airport, which is Class B airspace. Now the area that he mentioned extends somewhere between 1,900 feet to 10,000, and in this area here is 3,000 to 10,000. So if I were flying my drone at 400 feet or less, then I would be at a Class B airspace, but there's a strong possibility that I might be in underlying airspace, which I would need to check in advance. So this is Sky Vector. Now one of the apps that I'll show you later is called Before You Fly. That one is very easy to use on a mobile device, and I highly recommend that one. Google Earth Pro, when I'm doing a mission like this or flying in a populated area, and just zoom in. There's different tools. You can actually put yourself on the ground where you might be flying, and so Taste of Chicago is usually in this populated area here. And you can actually see what's there. You can view any obstacles in the way, see if there's any power lines. But as you can see, this is definitely not an area that you would want to fly in without doing any planning. It's actually the busiest area in downtown Chicago. So both of these tools are very helpful, and I highly recommend you use them for more complex missions like this.
What you so excited about?
Oh, I got paid $100 to do drone shots of this building right here.
This big building right here?
Yeah, I got my handy dandy Artel with me. I'm ready to get the job done.
Do you have a Part 107 license?
Part 107, no.
Well, it's kind of a big building. Do you have a visual observer?
Well, as long as I keep the drone high enough, I'm pretty sure I can see everything. Where did you get that vest from?
Scenario 2, I call that one Get Money. My friend was so excited that he was receiving $100 for taking drone pictures that he didn't realize that he was putting himself at risk. If he was to get fined by the FAA, they would take that $100 from him, plus he'd have to add more to it, unfortunately. He also didn't know about a visual observer because of the size of the building. That building is actually 3 or 4 buildings in one. It used to be an old warehouse. If he's taking pictures or photos, he may put his head down for a second and hit a power line or even some type of air conditioning unit on the building. He also didn't do any pre-planning. Seems like he pulled his drone out. They gave him the money to do the inspection. He didn't go check the weather. Because he didn't take the FAA 107 certification exam, he was flying on the edge of Chicago Midway Airport, control airspace, Class C.
Is that my neighbor?
thing is fast. Yeah, that thing is real fast and far. That far.
Hey, neighbor, what are you doing?
I got a new drone and I'm driving over the lake, over 1,000 feet.
1,000 feet? You're not supposed to fly over 400 feet.
I'm doing it.
And the lake is 5 miles away. You're not supposed to fly. You can't even see that far.
Nobody see me.
Now that was hilarious, but also scary. So, as far as this scenario, I call it Beach Watcher. One, he was flying a drone from a moving vehicle, and he had FPV goggles on his head. I don't even know how he would have been able to see if he put those down. I don't want to think about it. Since he was flying his drone over the beach, we can assume that he was flying over people that weren't part of his mission. And he wasn't keeping the drone within visual line of sight. And as far as altitude, he said he was flying at 1,000 feet above ground level, when 400 feet above ground level is the limitation. Now, there's also a limitation that talks about if you're flying 400 feet and say you need to do a tower inspection, you can fly 400 feet above the highest point in order to get that accomplished. But for recreational use, let's just keep it safe and say 400 feet above ground level. If you receive your Part 107, then you'll get training on that. But for this course, let's just say 400 feet above ground level. Again, he was out of range, and I'm sure he didn't check the airspace. It's a strong possibility that when he was flying over the lake, that he was in controlled airspace as well.
Hey, Mika, what are you doing?
Hey, trying to tackle this grass. What are you all doing today?
You let it go too long.
I know. Don't tell anybody.
Hey, we're going to the dune. Just got a new drone.
Yeah.
We're going to take it out and fly it tonight.
The
Get
dune-
some night shots.
Wait, so you all are going to the dunes?
Yeah, the Indiana dunes.
Oh, I think that's a national park, and you're not supposed to fly there.
No. Really?
Yeah, and
I didn't know that.
have you checked the weather? I think a really bad
No, look at it.
thunderstorm is coming in from the
Really?
west. Yeah, you may want to
Oh.
check the weather. Nigel, I wouldn't go.
My neighbors are the best, but today they're scaring me. The one before, and now this one as well. Luckily, they're just acting. But I call this scenario Indiana Dunes and Dog. The area he was looking to fly in is actually a national park. That's one of the regulations I didn't mention earlier, but it has to do with not disturbing wildlife or national parks as well. He didn't check the weather. There was a huge storm coming in that could have put my neighbor, his dog, and the drone at risk, maybe even other people. As far as night flying, we discussed that earlier. I looked, and the drone that he has, it didn't have anti-collision lights, so he wasn't legal to fly at night. In previous years, there was a separate night exam, but now it's all combined with the trust exam. But depending on when you take that exam, you want to make sure that it had information on flying at night. This is a sample screenshot from Before You Fly to show you the Indiana Dunes restricted area.